Good afternoon. It's time we get started. The agenda tonight is afternoon stormwater. And, it's a problem we have in the community. We know that. I've been here a long, long time. I know it. And so what we need to do as a community determine how we're going to handle it, if we can handle it, what plans we can come up with. I know there's a lot of people who would like to talk. What we would like to do is hold your conversation to about 3 minutes so more people can get to talk. And if it's something some said prior to you and you agree, you might just tell us agree. We don't need to keep going back over things. I have a speaking engagement. I have to be out of here by 5:30, so maybe we could limit it to 5:30, and if we have to, maybe we can do it again. So, okay, and just we need to be civil with each other. Let us know what you're thinking, and we'll take notes, and we'll kind of go from there. We have the county commissioners here and this county attorney. Thank you for coming. We appreciate that. I'd like you to sit up here with us, but you don't want to. We have Judy Lonis of COG. Thank you for coming, Judy. And we have Adam Lancaster, our city engineer. So do you want to start, Adam? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So it's been very dynamic as we've been putting this meeting together. We put a lot of information in your packet. We're not sure what direction you want to take it today or what specific questions you may or may not have, but the original intent was for us to come forward to you today. Judy's here next to me. She was our facilitator of the Stormwater Task Force that was formed earlier this year, and we've been meeting since March discussing various things. And so the original intent was to just kind of give you an update of what's been discussed, what sorts of things, ideas, and topics we have been going through since then. Just kind of give you an update of where that's at, and then go from there, if that's the direction you still want to take.
Sure, let's do that.
Okay. So we had a number of members of the task force. From City Council, we had Ashley Smith and Jim Meisner. Tony O'Rourke sat in on those meetings as well. And then we had representatives from the county, Tim Payne, Matt Koch, and Steve Morrissey. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we had Judy Lonis as a facilitator, and then we had Manny Cohen, who was a ditch representative. We also had other participants at various meetings, depending on what the topic was. I know the mayor attended some of those as well. So basically, through those meetings, just a recap of those meetings, initially we set up the expectations and the outcomes that we were looking for from the task force. The ditch companies were very concerned about the impacts of stormwater on their ditches. There was a need to review all the problem areas. We wanted to be able to minimize or mitigate the impacts at the easiest places first. We all knew right off the bat that we needed to find funding for long-term solutions and then be able to implement those solutions. And then we just made sure that all the entities shared that same common purpose and that recognized everybody needs to play a role in the solving the problem. So we gave a lot of information out to the group. We gave them information on drainage law. We gave them information on the city's stormwater funding, its utility enterprise. We gave them information on the drainage basins and the boundaries and how those things are impacted regarding stormwater. We talked about our pre-disaster mitigation plan that we have with the county that was recently updated and adopted. We talked about the $55 million plus capital improvement need that we have for stormwater in just the city alone. We informed the group that we were going to begin, and we are now in the middle of doing a utility rate analysis for both water and stormwater. We had hoped to have some of that information complete by this time, but we don't yet, but still plan to by the end of the year. And we also talked a lot about grant funding and what kind of grants are available for this type of work. We went through a fair amount of our time was spent on the possibility of discharging stormwater from the hydraulic ditch into the Abbey Detention Basin. We were able to secure some money from the Colorado Water Conservation Board. We met a number of times with them and were able to acquire money from CWCB to perform an analysis to see if that were possible, and discovered it was not based on the current conditions. We also talked about downstream on the hydraulic ditch from the Abbey Basin of what types of mitigation could be done, and we identified a project at Dozier that there's a possibility for a project there that may help mitigate some of the flooding issues related to the hydraulic ditch. And then long-term planning, we discussed consolidation of all the basin plans we currently have into one comprehensive plan with priorities and costs identified. We also talked about analyzing stormwater impacts to the hydraulic ditch and the necessary mitigation with an engineering study. And I can give an update on that later on. We did receive a high-level estimate for that, and we have that available now. The county indicated at the time that one of their main priority was recovery for the Hayden Pass fire burn, and that we discussed how the county is currently not under the umbrella of an MS4 permit, but could be. We went through, during the same time, the city had hired a consultant and had performed an analysis on the Northeast Canyon drainage basin. The reason that basin was priority was there are significant impacts to the hydraulic ditch in that basin, and the majority of citizens who have insurance policies for flood live in that basin, and so there was the greatest cost benefit to a project in there. However, and then we had a plan to apply for a FEMA grant to pay for that project this year. What we found after 30% design was done, the project was about $12 million price tag, even though it had a greater than 1 benefit cost ratio, which is very good for applying for those grants. However, the current grant, the grant total is capped at $4 million right now, so we had to rescind our application for this year since there's no money to make up the difference. And then finally, we looked at different options of expanding the stormwater utility perhaps beyond the city jurisdiction in order to generate the necessary funds for the capital improvements that are required. We reviewed special improvement districts, general improvement districts, a drainage authority, a public improvement authority, and a special district. And the group all agreed that probably a special district was the way to go in order to fund. And then there was a question on whether an existing special district could add to their work plan stormwater drainage. And so the question came about of whether the sanitation district may be interested in such a thing. And so Judy and I did go to the Fremont Sanitation District, and if you don't mind, Judy, I'll let you kind of fill in what we heard there from the Fremont Sanitation District.
Okay. So I don't have a lot to add to Adam's overall comments. We did present to the Sanitation District. Our purpose there, as he said, was we think the easiest route to take may be if an existing organization wanted to take it on, a sanitation district can do that. There are examples of that in the state. We did not go with the intention nor with any direction from the Stormwater Task Force to try to convince them to do that. We felt that we needed to at least extend the courtesy of asking them that question before we would just say we need to create something new. We felt it would be not considerate to consider their feelings and their thoughts, and so we really want to know what they think about that. We're not trying to push an idea on them. We just want to make sure that everybody's opinions are out there before any next steps are taken. So with regard to Adam's other comments, we also looked at what all plans are out there on stormwater. We wanted to make sure that if there are overlapping projects that have been identified in multiple plans, that we prioritize those. We also looked at those price tags, and are there any projects that obviously would be a good collaborative project or a project that could be done for less funding, so we could at least be inching our way forward. We talked about how a lot of the studies are done around the 100-year planning, and that's what we're required to do, and that's what FEMA wants us to do, but it was brought to the committee that those aren't our major issues. Our issues are those day-to-day flooding issues, and so, you know, how do we sort of move that conversation around to the things that impact us every day and not just be planning for the federal government's convenience on the 100-year stuff. And then we did really talk about what are those things that can be collaborative projects and what can the partners reasonably bring to the table.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's essentially the summary of what we've been working on since March. We can drill down into any of that more specifically in detail if you'd like, or whatever direction City Council wants to take today.
Okay, Adam, any questions of council?
Well, I would like to know how things went at your meeting with the sanitation district. What were the results?
They were fairly receptive. We did, I don't know if any are in attendance tonight as far as the board, but we did invite them to today's meeting, and they did ask us a number of questions and invited us back to their October 17th district board meeting to provide them with further information. So at least at this point, my take would be that they are interested.
Is anyone in attendance from the sanitation board today?
Okay.
Frank's here, he could speak.
Like Adam said, the sanitation district, said that they could think about, the issues that they're talking about and that. And once again, like I said, at the next meeting, when Adam comes, there were specific things that we asked him if he could bring information with regards to that, so that we can continue to look at it if this is something that we might want to get involved in that. So it's still an open door on our end right now. And all these meetings that are being conducted, I guess, will be a lot of information that's going to help determine whether or not the sanitation district wants to continue in with it. But we haven't shut the door. It's still open.
You said they gave you questions, Adam?
One of the biggest thing was how their current boundary overlaps the drainage basins that we're talking about. So we're working with that data to produce a map to show what that effect would be, because essentially they would be changing their district boundary to match the drainage basins, at least for that fee structure.
Okay.
And then they wanted a little more information on how our current fee structure works and how it might work with theirs.
Okay.
Yep.
Any council members have questions?
At what point do we want to go into more detail about some of the projects, collaborative projects we have just been discussing in the past at our stormwater meetings? Is that something you want to do now or after comments?
That's up to you guys.
I think we'd like to have some comments. I'd like to have comments, if we can, from the county commissioners or the county attorney. Would you want to add anything or say anything, or just listen to comments?
Jeff Blue from the sanitation district did meet with us and asked us our take on it, and which wasn't a whole lot. But we'd have to do the what's the plan? Service plan? We would have to amend the service plan, and that was one of the things we told them that would have to come from the county, and that's probably the biggest thing, and then it would have to be a vote of the people, as far as we know, right?
Not to amend their service plan.
Not to amend their service plan, but to get the whole, to add another dimension to their, yes, right, sorry.
When you
To their
say,
district?
Tim, when you say service plan, is that boundary? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's actually what their plan would be to move forward.
So the service plan means that they would change it from sanitary sewer only
okay,
to include
okay.
storm water as well.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. So, and then the possibility they'd have to conform their current district to conform to, hopefully, the drainage basins that we.
Right,
right.
Okay.
right.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Would it be beneficial when you guys meet again with the sanitation board to have representatives from city and county there as well, together?
We can talk
Or-
to Jeff Blue to see if that
Or
makes sense.
invite them
but
to
sure.
our stack force?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim. Any council member, any comments? If not, let's go ahead and start with some people. We have people that have signed up on this. We have Ben Jenkins of 1361 Harding. Ben, would you like to come forward and give us your thoughts?
First of all, Thank you for the chance to talk about this problem here. I live on the north side of Harding, and I'm in an unusual situation. My house is not in the city limits, however, my driveway is. And that's the bone of contention, is that the stormwater coming down the ditch that the city maintains there is eroding my driveway and part of my property. And I've began reaching out for help to, from the city to help solve that problem. The ditch is mowed annually, I guess, by B&G in Penrose, B&G Construction, and so I'm pretty sure that it's the city's ditch. However, that seems to also be a bone of contention, and it's not an irrigation ditch, although there is an irrigation ditch there at the same place that runs perpendicular to the stormwater drainage. And that is the problem that I've been faced with, the stem walls and actually the debris comes and washes up against the Fruitland lateral there, clogs up the ditch, and then it jumps out of the ditch and runs out onto Harding Avenue, taking all of the material from the Rutherford's yard and from my driveway out into the street. And so I would, like I said, I've been reaching out for help, but I haven't really managed to find any help yet.
Is that only occurs during a storm, during these downpours?
Yeah, yes, it has to be a heavy downpour. Otherwise, it's just a trickle going through there.
How far up Harding are you from 15th Street?
From,
From 15th Street, I can't imagine.
oh, about a block and a half. I'm right where Harding kicks straight west. It leaves the firehouse and runs at an angle for about,
Oh, okay.
75 yards.
Okay, you're on the north side.
yeah, I'm on the north side.
Okay.
And like I said, my house is not in the city, but
Okay,
my driveway is.
we can take a look at that.
Okay?
Okay?
And that's what I'm reaching out for.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
So Mayor, just a real quick comment on this, because it may be a common theme today. It's one of the reasons we're here, and we have,
Right.
and we have the people that are here, is his is a complicated problem because we have a ditch with so many different entities that are impacting his specific situation. We have a ditch company that's involved, we have county property, a drainage ditch that's in the county, but the city maintains for the benefit of our citizens. So it's right there at one of those boundaries that's an issue, and so that's,
Clarification, is it in the county or part of the county? Property that's in the county, or does it?
Debbie,
his property's in the county. The property that portion of the ditch is in is a county parcel, county-owned parcel, per the assessor. And the problem is there is a ditch lateral that crosses through a pipe across the ditch that blocks the flow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
okay? Okay, we'll note that. Thomas? This is a Manny Colon. Is Manny here? Oh, there's Manny. He's here. I thought he was here. Is he here? Oh, there he is.
No, you missed this meeting. He missed this meeting.
Well, first of all, I am Manny Cole, and I live at 3165 Grandview Avenue in Canyon City, Colorado. And I am the president of the Canyon City Hydraulic and Irrigating Ditch Company. And that's what brings me here to you today. I would like to thank everybody for setting up the Stormwater Committee. I think we've made a few leaps and bounds, but the leaps and bounds are pretty slow, as can be proven by some activity that's happened while we've had that meeting under construction or undergoing. Some of the things that have happened to us since then is the study that was done at the Abbey Detention Pond. I was in the impression that we were trying to determine if that pond could hold water during light storms and not during a 100-year storm. Instead, we had the $27,000 study to determine if it would hold a 100-year storm, and because FEMA's changed the regulations, it won't even hold a 100-year storm. The other thing we're doing is the city's building more detention ponds with a 100-year storm basis, and that does not cure our current problem. Our current problem is the light rains and light storms that fill up the ditch, and it tops over and washes people away. What we're doing is moving water from the west part of town all the way through the town and taking that storm water and dumping it on the people on the east side. And some of these patches that we're trying to do on a short-term basis aren't going to work. I do have here some solutions. One of them, I'd like to go back to the Abbey study and look at that with intent to use that in a weaker storm period to hold some of that water and prevent it from flooding people on roads. The orchard pipe is absolutely killing us, and we have to do something with that orchard drainage, or we cannot maintain and hold the ditch to the east end, even with some of the repairs that or some of the solutions that I've come up with here. Probably the best thing is another solution would be a dozer that would release the problem on the very east end of the ditch. Another solution I came to was with you, Mr. Mayor, on the ditch when the city did their little deal at Yale. That it proved to me that Yale, just one street being taken out of the system, flooded a lot of people in Canyon. And to fix that problem, you went back in and cut the curb. And that really hurt me. And we tried to correct one street, and it blew up in our face. And you can see the impact of one street versus the several that we have coming into the ditch. The other solution I came up with, I talked to you on the ditch bank about, would be a two-pipe system. That would be take our easement, put a stormwater pipe underneath the ditch, and have it follow it east to Formal Creek. That way, you are getting the water. You don't have to worry about the railroad track or the county highways, or Highway 50 and the service roads on each side and the Oil Creek ditch. That way, you can get the water directly to Formal Creek. I have a lot more to say, but my 3 minutes is up.
That's okay. Is there, you have it written down, could we get that typed up? And I've heard most of that. So Manny, can we get that typed up? Or can you send it to us, or you give it to me? Or I would like to see your suggestions again. And I know I've seen most of them, and we've talked about most of them. Let's do it again.
Yeah, we've also talked about them quite extensively at our Stormwater Task Force meetings, and for the most part, we're in agreement that all of these, most of these things need to be done, or all these hot spots need to be addressed. Our biggest task at the task force is finding money to do it. And of course, having the FEMA regulations, which was a real snag on our Abbey project that we were mutually hoping could be successful for addressing the day-to-day flooding issues, that we had the federal regulations that keep us from being able to do that.
Well, we've had a few grants go by us that we've let gone by because of timing. I think we just need to keep our eyes open and go after the grants that are available as soon as they come up. We should have some of that grant stuff written out in advance, and when we see a grant, jump on it and not mess around. That's the other thing.
Right, and we have written grants, and we have been denied those grants, and we also have acknowledged that a lot of that grant money is on hold because of the current Trump administration. So our options are really limited right now, but I agree, we need to do whatever we can.
Right. And then on what I've written down here as far as that two-pipe system, I know that we're looking at an awful lot of money to do something like that, but if we would come in, let's say at the high school, everything else is going through town, and within reason, we can handle some of that. It's when we start to get past the development straight west of Yale, which is the complex, that's where the city had the problem with the house and buying that property.
Those townhouses there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
where the
okay.
townhouses are. All that drainage comes in there, and that's just more than we can handle. By the time it gets to Orchard, the ditch is topping over, and people below it are getting flooded out. When it hits Orchard, the whole thing stops, and then it really goes to heck at that point. So if we would start there and double pipe clear to Formal Creek, that would be a very good solution. It's going to be a lot cheaper than trying to go underneath the railroad track at various places on the 5 storm drainages that you have listed on the board here.
Okay.
I only have one other comment is.
Sure, go ahead.
And that would be, I would like John Siren to be the one following me because he's the attorney representing the ditch company.
Is he here?
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, yeah, come on up, John.
Hi, my name's John Siren. I'm with Hoskin, Frean, and Kampf. We're a law firm located across the state. I'm located in Denver. Manny brought me onto this case because I've been working for and with the state for 20-plus years. I was the lead attorney for the state on all their water issues. I was actually a water judge up in Greeley, and then since that time I've been practicing on my own. But Manny was aware that my theory is always to work with people and try to find solutions as opposed to ever wanting to litigate an issue. Litigation spends a lot of unnecessary money on attorneys like me when it could be used to fixing the problem. So that has always been Manny's focus. And so with that in mind, I guess I'd like to say I really don't want to be here today because I really don't want to say, Manny, you need to go ahead and initiate some litigation just to get something going. But that's where I feel like we're sort of at this period. It actually was somewhat reassuring to hear that from you, I guess, Councilman Smith, that you felt some of these, Councilwoman, excuse me, Smith, that these solutions were some things that perhaps could be implemented. But Manny, to this date, hasn't heard any sort of commitment on any of these issues. And I'm afraid he's felt as if the solutions that he has been put forward have been dismissed for not always germane reasons. I feel as if we actually discussed this idea of using the Abbey today with the Division of Water Resources Division Engineer, Steve Whitty, who's been here for 38 years or so. The idea that because there's a 100-year flood issue, that would prevent using this as a temporary detention center in other circumstances is not accurate from our perspective. So there's been solutions that Manny's been trying to push forward that we feel have not been adequately implemented. And the tough part of this is that while these studies go on and while people try to figure out what's the good thing to do in the next 20 or so years, Manny's company is bearing the brunt of that. It was illuminating again today to go out and on Yale and see that there had been a new cut put in the curb and a new drainage put into Manny's ditch for stormwater as of, I don't know, last month or so. That's still the city is simply using the ditch as a piece of its own stormwater system without understanding the impact on the hydraulic ditch and frankly not understanding the impact on some of the other individuals in the city who are affected by that. So I guess the bottom line is at this point I'm unfortunately advising Manny that I think it might make sense to initiate litigation which would put a mediator, somebody such as Justice Hobbs, who was former Supreme Court Justice, could be put into place to, mediation is now required on basically all new civil litigation, and it might make sense that's the best route to go, that we move into a situation where we have a mediator who at least can help us solve some of the immediate problems, because from my client's perspective, going along with the situation as it is right now with some hope that in 20 years we might have come up with a solution is just not tenable. That's all I have.
Any questions of John?
Maybe Adam can help clarify. So when we went into the Abbey detention study, we both really wanted it to work out.
Sure.
It seemed like an absolutely fantastic solution and very reasonable. The results of the study coming from FEMA saying that didn't even meet 100-year flood requirements, and I was under the impression that meant absolutely no way can you use it for anything else. Adam and Corey, can you enlighten us on that? I mean, is there still a possibility that modifications can be made or adjustments or a plea to the state to
Sure,
make it work?
modifications could be made as Manny suggested, someone would still have to design those changes. We can't, so there's a cost there to that. Again, we're back to cost. And if we change the nature of what the pond's use is for, currently its protection is for a 100-year storm. If it's modified in a way that we are using it to leverage smaller storms and that sort of stuff, then that will change the nature of what that pond does. The pond currently as built has removed people from the floodplain. So if we allow its use for a smaller event, which smaller events do affect the ditch, then you're effectively removing that pond from that standard of protection for the FEMA floodplain insurance. So no one has said no to anything, but there's always the cost of analyzing it, designing it, and then building it. And then what are the other downstream implications that we may or may not have?
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment to that?
Well, John, are you done, do you think, or?
I'll turn over to
Okay,
Manny.
we'll give you some more time, Manny. Go ahead.
Thank you. I did talk with Steve Whitty today, and we did talk about the dam. We talked about dam safety, and we talked about who has control of that dam. We can do all the studies we want to do, and we can study for the next 50 years. But that dam is built with the intent to hold water behind it until it tops over, and it has a spillway on it and it can spill over. The way it's set up right now, it has a 36-inch orifice in the bottom of it, and when we top over at the hydraulic ditch, plus the water that comes down the Abbey drainage, it floods out those people on roads. It floods out the Humane Society, it floods out Bob Geem, it floods out people all the way down the street, and now the county has come in and cleaned and taken out an awful lot of stuff out of the storm drainage ditch from the corner of Ute and Rhodes on down toward the river, and that's going to make a big difference. But still, what water we have coming in there now, you still have the water that comes sheeting across the bottom of the Abbey from all of East Canyon area, and the water that goes down the south side of East Main, that all meets at that intersection. That intersection is our big problem, plus the pipe at Orchard, because the pipe at Orchard fills up and tops over the ditch, and so all that water has to have a place to go. So right now, what water does go through the 36-inch orifice just helps flood out the people on roads. So it is not protecting anybody or anything. And the ones you're building up north, you're spending money on, and they're 100-year setup too, and they won't work and they won't help you. So we're wasting money, and that's what I don't understand.
Well, I
And the use
understand
of
what
that
you're
dam.
saying. I don't understand what you're saying, Manny. So if we put water in there and it goes through, it's going to flood somebody. And if we don't put water in there, it's going to flood somebody too.
Well, there's a certain point, you can hold an awful lot of water in there that wouldn't be flooding people if you put actuators on both ends of it, or if you want to go completely non-electronic, there's ways to do that too. But what you do is you dump when you can, and when the dam gets so full, you have a sensor on there and it says, whoa, and shuts off the intake of the water and makes sure that the gate at the bottom is where it was. But if we know how much water is coming in from the west, below the dam, flooding out people, and monitor that, then we could have that gate open as wide as we wanted to without continual flooding to those below the dam.
So what would be your reaction, Manny, if we made those modifications and now those residents who are living around there who had that protection from their FEMA insurance, that's
Well-
lost, that's gone now because we made those modifications and lost that 100-year flood status?
I have not got authorization from the Canyon City Hydraulic and Irrigating Ditch Board yet, but one of the ideas that we talked about today in our meeting with Steve Whitty was the possibility of having a study on the dam itself and determining, having it done with another independent company, and have them look at what we could do to put an actuator in there to regulate the amount of water that goes in the dam during a storm. Whether it's a 100-year storm or not. If it's a 100-year storm, we're not going to be worried about it anyway because it's going to wash everything away. We're going to be another Dallas by that time. So, or Houston, I'm sorry. So
It doesn't take away the fact that we have to be responsible and do as much as we can to
Responsible?
protect our citizens. And 100-year floods,
Wait a minute, wait. If we're
both for
taking.
day-to-day
let's
and
hold it
100-year
down.
floods
All right,
that
that's
kill
enough.
people.
That's enough.
If we want to be responsible, and we take the water from the downtown Canyon City area and shove it out to the people east and flood them out, That's being responsible.
That's enough. That's fine. Thank you. Well, thank you.
I shouldn't get emotional. Sit on the
Well,
seat I'm with you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I apologize.
Doug Cone. Doug here? Hi, Doug. I'm doing all right so far. That's okay. It's Preston.
My name's Doug Cohen. I'm president of Oil Creek Ditch Company. I live at 1102 Vine Street, Canyon City, Colorado. I just wanted to get up here and not necessarily harp on what's been harped on, but the attorney mentioned that this is Manny's ditch. It's not Manny's ditch. It's not Doug Cohen's ditch. It's the shareholders' ditch. We're not here to represent Manny or Doug. We're here to represent over 500 shareholders. And so that needs to be understood. And I'd like to read you out of the Colorado drainage law. There's been things brought up about historic flows and that in particular. This is in paragraph 4. Ditch corporations that own ditches owe a duty to those property owners through which their ditches pass to maintain their ditches using ordinary care so as to prevent damage to adjoining real property. That's the case of Oliver versus Amity Mutual Irrigation Company. And then it goes on to say further, ditch owners are not required under the law to accept stormwater runoff that is result of development that occurs after the ditch was constructed.
All right, let's knock it off. We don't need that. We don't
That
need
is
that.
not
Thank
from
you.
one project to the next. Our ditch was constructed in 1864, and that was a whole lot of houses ago. So please keep that in mind. Also, the ditch owner would have a legal claim based upon trespass, as well as a claim based upon the fact that the ditch is not a natural drainage, and most likely the increased flows will be deposited into the ditch in a manner or quantity to do more harm than formerly. That's the case of Hankins versus Borland. Now, as far as the money issue goes, I know this has been put off for a long, long time, just like streets. But it can't be put off forever. It needs to be dealt with. If we have money to bring tourists into town and everything else, we need to start getting money for stormwater drainage. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
There's,
Okay. Huh? Is anybody else? Anybody else want to talk? Could I have your name? Come on up. And just sign the sheet so we know who you are. Oh, okay.
Yeah, my name's Adam Holliday. I live at 536 North Reynolds. I live right below the hydraulic ditch. I was here in this exact same building when they came to the homeowners in our area with respect to the stormwater drainage hold tank right to the east of us, not even 150 yards from my home. And they said it was to retain a 100-year flood and that they had to do it by FEMA law. That's what we were told back then, sitting right here. So now we're being told that it's not going to hold the 100-year flood.
FEMA changed their standards, that's why.
Do what?
At the time it did, but FEMA's changed their standards since then, and so it's changed.
Okay, but so then my next question is what are we paying for the stormwater drainage fee now? If that's what the citizens are paying for now. So where's that funding going? So if FEMA, my two questions are, what changed with FEMA that said that we can no longer use that as a drainage holdover for stormwater? And two, we're already being charged a stormwater drainage fee on our water bill every 3 months. So.
We have answers for that.
Thank you. That's what I want to know. because
Yeah, I mean,
Adam, do you
there-
wanna take that?
Well, there may be some confusion. No one has said we can't use the pond for detention. We're-
Did you,
that's
sir,
what
did
it's
you
being
sign
used
your
for.
name on that, please? Thank
So,
you. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, the standard that has changed that we've been referring to is the amount of rainfall that has to be calculated when you're looking at what the capacity of the pond is. And so ever since the flooding that's took place in Colorado and since 2013, they updated the rainfall data. So those numbers have increased. So if we were to build the pond today for a 100-year event, it would be too small. But using the data at the time it was built, it was designed for a 100-year flood and is still in operation.
Can you enlighten us on why the $4 stormwater fee isn't adequate to meet our stormwater needs overall?
Well, sure. I think I mentioned earlier, we've got some $55 million worth of capital improvement that's written into the pre-disaster mitigation plan. And we have a just under $800,000 budget annually, which the majority of that goes towards compliance with our permit and maintenance.
And that's required by the EPA. So the EPA gives us a whole list of things that we have to do and requirements that we have to meet. And that $4 charge that you get, it barely meets those requirements required of us by the federal government. We have a little bit left where we have a tiny reserve to go towards capital projects, but it's completely insufficient.
Yeah, in the past, we have banked a little each year for small capital improvement projects. We've actually reached the point where now we're in a deficit to do any capital.
Would you come on to the microphone? Come on.
Simply put, whether the federal government changes the regulations on you, the dam was built prior to the federal government changing the regulations, okay? That comes down to a simple argument of, why are we having to pay for it? If the federal government changes the regulations, it should be their responsibility to come in and make the adjustments to the retaining pond, not the city or the government.
We
We
think
all
that-
agree
If
with
they're
you
not
on
gonna
We
let
agree.
us live within the guidelines that they set down at
Agree.
that point in time for the retaining pond,
I agree with you.
okay?
I do.
Why are we, the taxpayers of this county, being told that we can't use whatever?
That's
I
why
mean,
we're,
that
yeah,
becomes
it's
the
a
attorneys,
problem.
you have a city attorney for that. You have a county attorney for that. That's what the taxpayers pay for.
Those mandates come from the federal government with no funding for us to do it. It happens all the time in not just stormwater, in many other different instances as well. It's
But
very
that's what-
unfortunate and very, very frustrating.
But I understand, but that's what the legal challenge system goes for. That's why you have attorneys for it. Challenge it.
That's what Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Simple.
I don't know, somebody needs to, if you would, tell me why this won't work. I mean, legally, federally, whatever. We have a ditch system that was designed in the late 1800s. Would it be less expensive to altogether enhance our ditch system? Is that something that would work? And I think it will be a lot less money than putting pipes under ditches and doing this and doing that. Is that something that could be achieved? Because like I said, we're dealing with a system that was built in the late 1800s, and now we're in 2017. Make the ditch better cooperatively and solve all the problems at the same time.
Doug, come on up.
That all sounds pretty simple, except for the fact that we don't want antifreeze, oil, and all the other trash in our irrigation ditches to go on the irrigated property. Thank you.
Okay, I didn't mean that to be rude, and I'm just, it was a question that's saying, okay, fine.
No, hey, Mark, I didn't mean to be rude either. I'm just saying, we don't want the debris.
Good talking, Doug, in the mic.
Well, but it's already going in there, and somehow it's being dealt with. I mean, I'm trying to be, like,
Yeah,
think
but-
out,
but-
okay,
No
Okay,
yelling.
all right.
I talked
Let's-
No yelling.
Oh, stop, let
never mind,
Doug
never mind,
talk.
bad
No,
idea,
let
I
Doug
will be
talk.
quiet.
Come
No,
on.
hey, let's not exasperate, let's not make the problem worse. Let's try to make it better.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. Lisa, come on up. Then we're gonna have to curtail this. and sign in, please. Okay.
Lisa Hyams,
Manny said that, I didn't.
3165 Grandview Avenue. I live in the county. I was just going to make a mention, just kind of to respond to Mark's comment. If we could all work together to make something better, it would be wonderful. The problem is that every time we have a storm, every time the ditch is shut off, and so that none of the water that's running through that ditch is irrigation water, it's all storm water. Every time we call the city and ask for help to help us maintain the grates, to keep them clean so that the water flows through, we get no response, we get no help, and all of the responsibility for handling the stormwater falls on the ditch company. So financially, they have to take care of your stormwater every time it rains. And every time it rains, we call and ask for help, and we never get a response. And so you want us to work together. We do need to work together. But the city needs to step up when we have rain and assign someone to help the ditch company. Until something is done, somebody has to help the ditch company. Because I'll tell you, I'm up all night, every night with Manny, cleaning out those grates and trying to keep the water flowing as smoothly as we can, with people yelling and screaming at us and our phone ringing off the hook all night long, begging us to turn off our ditch water when it's turned off. We're the ones that get the heat from the people and have to work all night long to keep that stormwater clear.
Okay, thank you, Lisa.
My response to that would be,
No.
we've
No,
identified a
okay.
problem, let's try to fix it.
Let's, we're gonna just stop. You gotta quit those outcasts, stop making the noise, okay? Next, who would like to talk? Yes, ma'am, we need your name.
My name is Kathy Trejo. I live at 2217 Cherry. I have a share in the ditch company. I've been flooded a lot. I'm talking about if we get over 2 inches of rain, my property is flooded. And I was on the committee to form this utility way back when Bob Solomon and whoever else was the city administrator. So that's been a long time now, and we're still trying to get something done, and we have the stormwater utility. So how many years is that since Bob Solomon was, and the other city, I don't know if it was Steve Rabb or somebody else that was on that committee with me.
What utility are you talking about?
The stormwater utility. After I was on this, well, like they formed their committee, right? I was on the city's stormwater committee. And that's been what, 8 years ago or 10 years ago? I don't know how long it's been. It's been a long time now. So what I'm trying to say is this: we're not getting anything done. So I'd like to have something done because I get flooded out. So,
We would too. We would like to have that done,
right.
but it's cost money.
But I'm not talking about 10, 15 years from now either.
We have a stormwater fee, and we have a
Yeah, we
stormwater.
do. And it's been going on now, but we still haven't gotten any relief. So I think, and I'm one of the ones, I was out there on that last time that the hydraulic was full, trying on that Sunday evening with my rake to try to get the debris out where that pipe goes across on Gradine. So what I'm trying to say is this: we can't have, extra water in there. It just causes trouble. And I have to worry every single time if we have extra water, a heavy rain, whether my whole property is going to be flooded or not. And that mud's not fun, trust me.
Where's your address?
Kathy Trejo.
No, what's your address?
I'm sorry?
What's your address?
2217 Cherry Street.
Okay.
So that's all I'm saying. I'm
Right.
saying let's try to do something in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you. All right, okay, we're getting close to being done. Yes, Mr. Meisner?
Just a couple of comments.
Yeah, why don't you come to the microphone?
My name's Jerry Butts. I'm president of the Fruitland Ditch Company. And the questions I have, is any of the money from flood control, because it sounds like we're getting ready to get an increase, is any of that being used for anything but flood control?
Yes.
And what would that be?
Water quality,
Anything else?
maintenance of the existing facilities.
Okay, I just wanted that for the record. The next question is, if any of the ditch companies were flooding county or city property, how long would we have to change it and fix that and alleviate that problem? Would we have endless studies and endless time, or would we just be required within a real short time frame to fix it? Anybody?
Well, if your ditch collapsed, you certainly would have to, but we're probably being flooded now anyway by stormwater.
I'm talking about if we were putting tailwater into the wastewater treatment or the water treatment. If it ran into there, how long would we have to fix it? There'd be no time at all. You'd be on us like there was no tomorrow.
Okay.
I think the point of our meeting today
Is another endless
is
meeting.
a recognition that there is some very, please, this is a formal court, and applause isn't respectful to the system. And we are saying here together, as city officials and county officials, that we are sitting together trying to get solutions to this problem. We recognize that not only is there 100-year problems, that there are very, very serious day-to-day problems. And it really winds down to money and collaboration between different entities. And I would like to maybe, this would be a good time to go into more detail about some of the positive things that we have been doing to work together to try and come up with a solution
I'm
to
all
meet
for
these
working
needs.
together as long as
I
something
think
gets
that
done.
I would like you guys all to recognize that we are working hard towards this. There are some solutions. There are complicated solutions. They're not going to be easy, and they will require extra funds from our citizens. But we do want to reach an agreement, and we obviously this is a huge problem. We know that. It's top number 3 on our citizens' worries. Our city hall is very rarely this full. So is it okay, Mayor, if we do start to proceed with talking about some of the solutions that we've been
All right, what are the
to
solutions?
achieve?
We're moving on to, maybe we can talk about some solutions. We know there's
Maybe if we
problems.
talk about solutions, then maybe that'll answer some of your questions, and then maybe we can have an opportunity to move forward.
George, did you have the solution
Tim?
or a suggestion? Tim, who's Tim? Oh, Tim.
Sure.
Tim Payne. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry, George. Tim, I didn't see Tim. You can stay there, George.
Well, first of all, Manny and I have had several conversations on it. Manny does have good suggestions, and I think it would behoove you to take a look at those. Like you had mentioned, Mr. Mayor, about getting a copy of those.
Sure.
And then some of the, I was on the Stormwater Task Force along with Ashley, and one of the things that we've come up with is the Dozier Hill project, and we talked extensively about that. You know, the county said they would have conversations with that and take a look at that. And as far as I know from our last meeting, the ball was in the city's court. Adam was supposed to work on the scope of work on the project, get us a design and a plan to see how we can move forward with that. As far as I know, that's where that is. And so if we can get something back on that, so we can go to our DOT director, Tony Adamic, and see what we can do there. We did clean out roads. That was one of the first things that this task force would ask the county to do, so we did get that done, the ditch down there. And so there has been some positives. And so I guess that's about all I have to say from that.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, the Dozier project, we'll be working on that. That probably would be next.
Well, pending
Well, let
our
me
ability to contribute funds from both city and county. Adam, have you had a chance to put together any of those
No, I'm
numbers yet?
still working on that, yep.
Okay. George?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name's George Turner. I live at 1514 Vine Street in Canyon City. I've got a little different issue I'd like to bring up, and I didn't know that we were going to discuss these kinds of things today, but...
We didn't either.
Pardon?
We didn't either.
Oh.
Those are not solutions, they're
I would
problems.
hope that the city council would look at their stormwater utility fee and reconsider it. We don't all live in the same situation. I don't live on a paved street with curb and gutter, and I don't live on a building lot. I don't have square feet of property. I have acres of property. And I would be willing to bet you that every drop of water that falls on any impervious surface that I have never leaves my property. An example, I tore down an old house, and there was left a small pad of concrete. It's like maybe 8 feet by 15 feet. I get charged a stormwater utility fee for that little pad of concrete every 3 months, every quarter. I get a bill for my stormwater utility fee on that piece of property for 64 cents, which is, in my opinion, ridiculous. And those kinds of things ought to be resolved, I think, in my opinion. Whether you're being charged for a really small piece of impervious surface, or whether you have enough property that the water that falls on your impervious surface never leaves your property.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, George. Any other comments?
Tony, do you want to give us a sneak peek to the beginnings of this study that has been done about our stormwater fees?
Yeah. We've hired a firm to look at both the water and stormwater fees. They'll be addressing that with the council on October the 18th. I can tell you as of right now, as Adam had alluded, the current stormwater fee is insufficient. It's barely addressing standard operating and maintenance requirements. It's not contributing significantly at all to capital improvements, which really is the solution to many of these problems. That we need capital improvements. Currently this year we're projected to have a deficit in that fund of $600,000. Now that's given the fact that we've hardly spent any money on capital. That's just operating and maintenance expenses we exceeded for the revenue source. Next year we're already projecting, if the fees aren't addressed and adjusted by this council, we're looking at another deficit of $300,000. So this fund is quickly going into complete red, and there will be no monies available for anything. So the public is going to have to make some hard decisions here. We know from the citizen survey, only 24% of the community believes that our stormwater efforts are adequate. I think we recognize that too. That's not the issue. We recognize the problem. There is, as you've just expressed and others, is a lack of revenue to address the broader problem. And right now we have at the minimum almost $55 million of backlog capital improvements to address stormwater problems. Also, I think we need to work with the county, as reflected here in the 6 major stormwater basins of the city. 82% of the acreage is in the county, only 18% in the city, and yet it's the current citizens within the city that are carrying the full burden of stormwater fees. We've got to be more equitable. That cost has to not only be increased, but has to be spread to a larger audience that is part of this problem, but also part of the solution. So we'll see what goes forward with the council's review of these rates, but right now, simply applying higher rates to our residents within the city is not going to address this problem long term.
Sam.
Well, that's why we are going to this sanitation district and asking if perhaps we could form a stormwater district with them, where it would cover the urban growth area in Canyon City. So it's not just Canyon City residents, but all urban areas within our city limits. So we all could help share that burden, because right now the city has requirements from EPA that we've mentioned that we are going into a $600,000 deficit to in this year to meet their federal requirements. But the county areas, which has urban residents in it, they don't have to meet those requirements. And so it makes it unfair to our citizens, and it makes it very costly to our citizens as well. And we project that the fee per acreage dramatically increases if it's just charged within Canyon City boundaries. However, if we were able to create a stormwater district that covered everywhere, all the urban areas in Canyon City, that it would be much more doable to be able to meet all of our stormwater needs, be much more reasonable. So that's one of the solutions we're working towards. As we mentioned before, we're also trying hard to work with the county at the Dozier project. It'll be awesome if we can make that work together. It's on county property, but with city and county putting money together, we can get some solutions done there, and hopefully moving into the future be able to meet that. Are there any other things that I personally would like to see city to make a priority to have some budget money in 2018 to have some city crews when there are storms to go meet out at the hot spots where there's flooding to help clean out those grates and help alleviate flooding to our citizens. I think that would go a long ways to recognizing our part in this and helping to alleviate the burden on our ditches. And also, if we could look at that Abbey study again and see if there is a way we could possibly use it and see the and be honest with the implications for everybody, not just those downstream, but those who'll be affected by their FEMA insurance as well if we do make changes.
Commissioner
That's just
Bell?
one
I'm
of
sorry.
my
Are
That's
you
just
done?
one of some of my
Okay.
things that I would like to.
And I agree. Commissioner Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments. First, as speaking for me, I'm a little bit concerned that we don't have numbers or figures or even a scope of a project yet for the Dozier Avenue, simply because we are neck deep now in budgeting for 2018. And so if we don't even know what's being asked of us, we certainly cannot budget for that. So I just want to make that clear. Secondly, a question that I have, and Ashley, I don't know if you could answer this, if Adam could, if someone could answer. If indeed the answer lies within creating a new district for stormwater, whether that ends up with a current district such as sanitation, or if something new is constructed, where does the governance lie with that? How would that actually work? Would that be money collected by a different district that then would flow to the city for the city to spend? Would that completely lie with a brand-new board that would be elected? I just am unclear on how that would work.
So what would happen and how we discussed it with the sanitation district would be, we would dissolve our enterprise. We would have no need for our utility. Now, would our stormwater costs as a city go to zero? No, because we would still have our obligations. We would still have our MS4 permit, but we'd probably have some type of intergovernmental agreement with the new district, similar to the way that the Urban Drainage Flood Control District in Denver has with its surrounding areas and municipalities. So the fees collected would then transfer, they would be entirely the district's money. And the city would probably likely not even collect a fee anymore. They would find a way in their general fund to do the minimals type of stuff that we have to do. But capital, or it could work the other way. We could still retain a fee that's just for the minimum MS4 compliance, depending on how that works between the intergovernmental agreements, and the new district only do capital improvements. Urban Flood Control District even contracts with private entities to help do maintenance and construction for some of the things in their district. So it could look many different ways, but there wouldn't be double dipping. That was one of the questions.
A new board would be elected, though?
Be a new board, yes.
Okay.
It'd be similar like a fire district or
Yeah.
sanitation district.
Yeah.
So,
Could I ask one more question?
yes, ma'am.
Under that situation or circumstance, would the city and/or the county then be required to pay fees for our impervious surfaces and for your impervious surfaces, parking lots, roads, all of those different things?
The city currently pays impervious surface fees, as well as the county, as well as the federal government within the city boundaries. So no one's exempt from it. The only impervious surface that is exempt is roads, and the reason for that is it's the one public facility that everyone uses. We would just be exchanging money on paper, basically. So everybody already does that.
So that structure would not change?
That would be up to the new district, but I would imagine it would stay the same. That would be the most equitable thing to do.
I do have a quick question. Adam, is it possible, since we are all at our crunch numbers for budgeting for 2018, to get at least some somewhat accurate numbers?
I gave a rough estimate when we started that whole discussion. We can pull that back out and I can remind everybody what that number is. But I gave a rough estimate for Dozier initially. The only thing that's changed since then, there was a request for some detailed scope and costing, it hasn't been done yet. But we had already given a general basic estimate. We'd also indicated what the city had budgeted that we could contribute. So if it was a match for match or something like that, but I think we have information we could give everybody for budget time if that's the
Okay.
I
concern.
mean, it would be way awesome if we could at least earmark something to go towards Georgia to move forward.
Yes, sir.
I think part of our concern on that, Adam, was, yes, you had an estimated cost, but it did not detail anything below that as far as that alternate ditch, that alternate overflow ditch. Who's going to maintain that? What's it going to take? We don't want to flood the people out east of there. None of that was included in that, and I think that's part of our need to know on that as well.
Okay.
Okay, there was a gentleman, one more gentleman right there keeps raising his hand unless you're just exercising. No? Why don't you? What? You have a solution? Great.
It's a possible solution. You were talking earlier about grants that you were trying to obtain from FEMA and from other organizations. As a former farmer in Texas, we would get in certain highly erodible areas along buttes and mesas and stuff like that to protect our waterways. We would get grants through the ASCS, the Agricultural Soil Conservation Service at that time. I don't know how it works in Colorado. It would probably be like the NRCS. And what they did was, the ASCS office worked with the landowners by looking at the map. Your drainage system is outside the city limits. Your problem is coming from the mountainsides that drain into the city. This is where your drainage problem is coming from. So if you could get a grant when they become available and work with the private landowners and put in simple things like spreader dams, retainer dams, anything like that that would slow the water down at that level and work it like a terrace. I saw that same thing happen in outside of Amarillo, Texas, in a small community there. They had a mesa that was draining off into a town. If you use a spreader dam concept and a terracing concept through the spreader dam concept naturally on the terrain, and you did that in conjunction with the landowners through the federal grant process, a lot of your issues with the stormwater drainage system is going to be dissipated greatly. I have a degree in geology too, so I'm kind of a little familiar with the clay soils and stuff that you have around here and the rocks and stuff like that. So it is a solution, and you might not can get a grant for it all, but what if you got a grant for $500,000 from FEMA, okay? And you want to work with the county, okay? This is outside the city limits, but you can work with the county with this grant and go through your ASCS office, okay, in conjunction with the BLM, okay, because there's a lot of, half the land around here is owned by the federal government. So you would have to work with the federal government in this process, probably the Forest Service or the BLM. And that is a very doable solution. Then you get the grant, and then you could just shove it out there and put your spreader dams in and start terracing your spreader dams from the top to the bottom. And you do that over a period of 10 years in $200,000 and $300,000 increments, and you'd be surprised what you can do with the flow of your water. It'll stop dramatically. I've seen some serious flash floods in West Texas.
Yeah, I've heard of them too. Okay, getting close. Are we going to keep that committee going that we had?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I keep trying to steal Ashley's mic, and she takes it back. I think there's a couple of things. One, I think it makes realistic sense to try to provide some city assistance on cleaning those grates. We need to try to look at that as a council in the 2018 budget. The second thing is, we need to continue the commitment to work together. I mean, it's a massive problem. We don't have enough money for it. The starting process will be to adjust those rates. And it's similar to the street problem. We all know the problems there. We all know it's an expensive solution, but we're all really hesitant, myself included, to pay more. Every time we get a large rain, I myself get really concerned, and I live nowhere near a ditch. But the water runs down 9th Street and then runs right across my property and floods my garages. But, I mean, I've got similar problems to yours. It may not be the magnitude of yours, but we've got all types of drainage problems in the city that ultimately are going to be resolved by money. And we need to figure a way of being able to pay for those projects. We can't go out today and get a grant because we have no funds to supplement the grants. So we need to start with looking at those rates and adjusting those rates and continuing to address the affordable problems that we can. If the grates and the storms is an issue, that overall solution is really, really minor compared to the big problem. If we need to get one or two crew members out there with a backhoe or whatever's required during a storm through 5 or 6 hours to help alleviate that, that's a minor issue in the scope of this whole problem.
Okay.
But we need to work together. We can't stop this group. We've made, it may not look like it, but we've made tons of progress from where we started 4 or 5 months ago. You can have your mic.
Let's wrap it up. Any comments from county? Judy? Dwayne?
I'll make kind of one comment. I kind of want to piggyback on what you said, Jim. And his idea, at the first of the meeting, Adam said that we're still trying to get some money to help with flood mitigation up at the Hayden Pass Fire.
Yeah.
I've been working on that diligently. Most of those federal grants are 25% match. It's hard to come up with that much money when you're talking $5–10 million. It's hard to come up with that match money. So there is a need to start somewhere, and I'm trying to get other grants from other places to use for that match. So there does need to be a starting place. I don't know if that's your solution, but it's hard to do. So those federal grants are there. Actually, they're not. The other day, before the hurricanes hit, there was $21,000 in that federal account, and there was $21 million worth of grant applications out there. Since the hurricanes have hit, the administration has dumped some money in there, but a lot of that's going to go to those hurricane victims down there. So that money is not easily to get, even with the grant match money. So it's something we got. I look at it every day. I'm fighting with it every day. So we can kind of tag along with this as it goes along too, but it is a tough situation.
And oftentimes, a $1 million grant, you got to have the $1 million, and then they reimburse you. And so that's tough to come up with too. So you could get a $5 million grant, but how many of us have $5 million laying around because you got to fund it, and then they pay you back? Kind of tough. Yes, ma'am. Just a few minutes, and we're going to go.
My name is Deb Bondra. I live at 236 Gradine, and I'm wondering why Canyon is limited to one retaining. You know, the avenue.
Yeah, one earthen.
Why is it
yeah.
limited to one? Why couldn't there be, like the gentleman who spoke before me, why couldn't there be more retaining ditches done outside of the city to hold the runoff? Because it seems like it would be beneficial for Canyon, especially during drought and stuff, to have those retaining ponds for the city, and it would be beneficial to the community as a whole.
Usually have to acquire the property or have the landowner give it to us. And a lot of people don't want to do that.
And we have more than one.
What?
We have numerous detention
Yeah, we
basins.
have numerous ones.
But we
yeah.
keep talking about one runoff.
Oh, that's the one that we would like to use for alternative purposes on a 100-year flood.
So are the other ponds being used?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
considering that we pay for the water that runs off, it doesn't seem like we're utilizing the runoff. It seems like we're running it back someplace where the city's not utilizing it.
Yeah, the ones that are north of town, they get used. They get water in them. It rains. So. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
One more thing I mentioned that I would circle back to, if it's okay.
Sure.
So, as we've talked about, the hydraulic ditch is a big part of this, and part of the problem with past drainage basin studies that have been done is they have been done with the purpose of mapping the published floodplain, which is what the flood insurance program uses, flood insurance rates. And FEMA's rules are to ignore a irrigation ditch that the channel crosses, for the very reasons that we're talking about. So a lot of those studies like I said, those studies skip over basically and pretend like the ditch is not there when they're mapping the floodplain. So that, of course, affects the actual accuracy and what's happening on the ground. That being said, we've talked numerous times with the task force about we need to specifically identify where the ditch is impacted, where the flows are coming from, and then where those discharges in the worst places are so that we can prioritize when we have money where to spend it. So we did ask Atkins, our consultant, to do an analysis. We have a verbal from the Water Conservation Board to help participate again with a study and a solution. But the Conservation Board specifically said the three players in this are the ditch, the county, and the city, and everyone has to come to the table with some skin in the game or they will not participate. So we've got that estimate. It's around $180,000 to do that. And that would bring us to a point where we're prepared to be proactive instead of reactive when it comes to the ditch. So we'll talk about that more as the task force reconvenes and so forth. But I just wanted to make the point that, again, there is some money available, but they recognize that there's more than just the city at the table that needs to participate.
Okay. When's the next meeting?
We haven't scheduled it yet, but we were typically, once a month? That's what we were meeting, so we might be able to still get one together this month, but definitely next.
Let's try and do it this month.
Yeah.
Okay?
Just quick.
Quick?
I'm actually part of that committee and nobody's ever seen me. I was under, I had put out a request when I volunteered for that process that those be held after my work hours. And just for the rest of the group, that never works out like that. So, I mean, it's extremely difficult for me to take a day off of work, more than I do now, to participate in a meeting. But I'm still part of the group. I still want to at least keep associated with the group, but it's really a challenge for me to be an active part of those meetings. And the second point was very quickly. We seem to have some different opinions about the Abbey Pond. I think it would maybe be in order for us to at least try to come to some consensus as to what makes sense with that particular thing, whether we can or cannot use it for light rain or as some method of helping with the problem.
Okay. Thank you. Let's conclude, and you'll have your committee meeting, and everybody knows what's going to be. So, thank you all for coming.